Good morning. For those of you that are visiting, once again, we're very thankful that you chose to be with us. There is a story that never grows old. No matter how many times we hear it, it never is old. And that's the story of Jesus. Jesus was with God in the beginning. Jesus is eternal. Jesus is the Son of God. And when the time was right, God sent his Son to earth to live in a human body and experience everything that we experience. Jesus was born of a virgin, Mary. And Joseph was his father. And Joseph, being a good man, married her. And when Jesus was born, he was born like any other baby. He was placed in a manger. And he learned to crawl, he learned to walk, he learned to talk. And he grew. When he was 12 years old, his family went to Jerusalem. And after they'd traveled away, Mary noticed, where's Jesus? He's not with any of the relatives. So they went back. And there is Jesus sitting in the temple, listening, asking questions. And they were amazed at his knowledge. They were amazed at his questions. Then his mother came to him, like all of us, a little panic. And Jesus said, at 12 years old, I must be about my Father's business. And Jesus continued to grow like all teenagers. And then when he became an adult, he went to work. But then the Word of God tells us, at the right time, Jesus started his journey to the cross. Every step that Jesus took was towards that cross. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He taught. He fed people. But there again, when the time was right, Jesus turned and set his face on that cross. He stopped at the Garden of Gethsemane, and he fell on his face, and he literally begged God, let this pass from me. But not your will, not my will, but your will be done. And Jesus stood up and said, let's go, it's time. And he went outside, and there they were with clubs. And Jesus said, I don't understand this. I was with you every day, and nobody brought a club, but now you do. And we know that everything that Jesus went through, all the horrible, horrible things he went through, then at the end, he laid down on that cross, drive the nails into my hands and my feet, and they dropped him in that hole. And he hung there until he died. But his story didn't end there. He arose. And that gives us the promise and hope that when we die, we will rise again. And then he descended back to heaven, where he will be for all eternity. That story never grows old. But what I'd like to look at this morning is our story. What is our story? If Barbara was to stand up and tell you my story, what would she say? What would I say? Let's look at Revelation chapter 20, beginning in verse 12. Revelation 20 and verse 12. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, stand before the throne. And the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books, according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. The book of life. What does it say about David? When I stand before the throne of God and give an account of my life, what is it going to say? The wonderful thing is, brothers and sisters, our story is still being written. It isn't over yet. It's still being written. The things I've done in the past, the way I've lived, the way I'm living right now, is recorded. It's being written down, my story. Some of the worst sins that we read about in the Bible of these people that committed these horrible sins, they became a positive impact on the world. Their story did not end with their mistakes. They committed these horrible, horrible sins, but they came back. They repented and came back. There's times we may have felt defeated in our lives. Someone may feel that way now, that I'm defeated. But we're not. Our story does not end there. We can still write our story. Let's look at some of these examples. Let's first go to 2 Samuel, chapter 12. 2 Samuel chapter 12, we have Nathan coming to David, and he gives a parable. And he said, David, I'm going to tell you a story. There was a man, he was very, very rich. He had multiple herds, all these animals and everything. But then there was another man. This man was poor, very poor. He had one baby lamb. Just one baby lamb. And he loved that baby. He took it into his house and fed it from his table, gave him drinks from his cup, brought it into his bedroom at night, and took care of that little baby lamb, because that's all he had. And then somebody came to this rich man's house, and the rich man did not want to take a lamb out of his flock. So he went over to this very poor man and took his. Let's look at what David said in verse 5. Then David's anger burned greatly against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, surely that man who has done this deserves to die. He must make restitution for the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and had no compassion. Nathan then said to David, you are the man. You're the one that did this. Horrible, horrible sins. He lusted uncontrollably. He committed adultery. He committed murder. He was the man. But David's story did not end there. He came back. He repented. He made his life right with God. and then what a positive impact he had on the world. Let's look at somebody else. Matthew chapter 26. We have the account of Peter. Matthew 26, and we're going to look at verse 72 in a minute. But let's set the scene. Jesus told Peter, he said, before the rooster crows, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. No, I won't, Lord. No, I won't. I look back at my life. When I was younger, I was timid. Peter said, I will not do it, Lord. I love you. I won't do it. Then he's out there around the fire, and a girl comes up and said, he was with him. Oh, no, I wasn't. He took an oath and said, I do not know the man. Then again, they came to him and said, he was with him. Took an oath, I do not know the man. Quit bothering me. I don't know him. Then the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered what he said. And let's look at verse 72 of chapter 26. Then Peter remembered the word which Jesus had said, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Yes, he sinned. But Peter came back and repented. His story did not end in sin. He turned around and looked at the impact that Peter had on the world. It didn't end there. Yes, these men sinned, but they made it right. And their stories were great from there on. One more. The Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 22. Acts 22, let's begin with verse 4. Paul is saying, I persecuted this way, the church, to death, binding and putting both men and women into prisons. And also the high priest and all the council of the elders can testify. From them I also received letters to go to the brethren and started off for Damascus in order to bring those who were in Jerusalem as prisoners to be punished. We all know how Paul persecuted the church. Put Christians to death, put men and women in prison. Paul was bent on destroying God's church. But on the road to Damascus, the Lord appeared to Paul. And Paul repented. And look at what a great influence he was. All of the letters that he wrote, all the places they went to, how many were converted because of him? Yes, they made mistakes. Yes, I've made mistakes. But our stories do not end there. We go on and we make a positive influence in the world. Let's look at 3 examples now of people that didn't come back. Let's go to Matthew chapter 25. We have, beginning in verse 1 through verse 13, the 10 virgins. They were supposed to prepare, have their lamps filled with oil, and the wicks trimmed, and 5 of them did. But 5 of them didn't. They just kind of gallivanted around, didn't do anything. And then verse 11, the bridegroom came, and it says, later the other virgins also come saying, Lord, Lord, open up for us. But he answered, truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you know not the day or the hour. We don't know when the Lord's coming. And so I need to be on the alert. I need to be ready. I need to have my lamps filled. I need to have the wicks trimmed. I need to be ready, because we don't know. We don't know. And then let's go on to the talents. We're all familiar with that talents. What did God do with one talent? He buried it. He said, Lord, I know how you are. And I was afraid, and I buried it. I buried it. Have you ever been afraid as a Christian? I'll admit to you, I have in the past. Verse 29, for to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave into outer darkness, into the place where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's called a worthless slave because he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. Do we ever take a day off and not do nothing? It's a good class on prayer this morning. We need to be praying all the time. And then one last example. And then in chapter 25, and let's look at verse 45. Well, Jesus said, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I had no clothes, I was in prison, but you didn't do anything. And then verse 45, then he'll answer them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous in eternal life. It's not just enough to have a bunch of good things in our story. We need to ask ourselves, have I left anything out? Have I left anything undone? Our story is being written. I believe, looking at these 3 individuals, I believe this is an example why we need to be a very, very close family. God and Christ instituted the church, and he has us come together for a reason, so we can get close. If we bind ourselves together, you can't break that apart. If we're here, a part of the family, an active part of the family, people will see us and say, hey, you need to fill up your lanterns. You need to get fuel in those right now. Don't bury your talent. Use it. When we're part of the family and real close to the family, I can look and say, she needs help. He needs help. Part of the family, will make our story better. Better. Let's look at Hebrews, and you all know where I'm going. Hebrews 10, verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembly together as the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. When you're part of the family, we are here to help each other, to encourage each other, to build each other up. And we help each other get to heaven. I can't get to heaven alone. I need you. I need Barbara. All these years, she's kept me on the straight and narrow. She's had a busy life. We need each other. But be very thankful. Our stories aren't over. There is still more to write. Let's continue to make each chapter the best it can be. The best it can be. Let's work at that. 2 Corinthians chapter 13. Chapter 13 and verse 5. Test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Examine yourselves. Or do you not recognize this about yourself, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless you fail the test? Unless you fail the test. I did not do good in school on tests. Did well enough to get by. But the test that we're taking now, we just can't get by. Test yourselves. We never know when our story will end. Let's make sure our story is glorious. Glorious. And let our stories end with God saying, "Come in, my good and faithful servant." He's going to say to those on his right, "Come with me and spend eternity with me." And those on his left, depart. In James chapter 4, verse 14, James says, "Your life is but a vapor. It appeareth for a little while, and then vanishes forever." When I was in my early 20s, I taught a class on that. I thought I knew what it meant. But when I turned 40, I knew what it meant. When I turned 50, I really knew what it meant. When I turned 60, I really, really knew what it meant. This life is short. No matter how long it is, it's short. And we need to use this time to make our stories great. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, beginning in verse 13, the conclusion, when all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether good or whether evil. The conclusion of the whole matter is to keep God's commandments. Back in Matthew chapter 26, verse 72, when Peter found out that he had sinned, he went out and he wept bitterly. when I sin, I need to weep bitterly. Because sin will cause us to be cast into hellfire for all eternity. But the good news is, our story still be written. We're each still writing our story. And let's make it a great one. Let's start right now and keep going on and keep going on and testing ourselves and make this story great. We can make our story what it ought to be. As long as there's breath in our body, we'll be writing our story. As long as this world stands, Jesus Christ's invitation to come to Him will always stand. We're going to sing a song of encouragement, I Am Resolved. When I saw that Russ selected this song yesterday, I've been thinking about it. And I think it'd be a good thing for me every morning to, when I get up, say, I am resolved. My story's going to be great. As we sing this song of encouragement, if God's people can help you in any way, we love you, we care, and we all are here to take care of each other. Let us stand and sing the song.